Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining Grant Thornton's event on the benefits of humanizing your digital customer journey. We're very excited about today's event, and we have some fantastic panel of speakers. Just in terms of your participation, some logistics. If you want to join, you join by audio, you click on the listen in, and then you're able to submit questions and comments via the controls panel. Today's presentation is being recorded, and you'll be provided with to all of those who've registered today. So please do, we would like to keep this interactive, and it's quite important that we do want to make sure that we're answering your questions as we go along. So please do actually comment in terms of your questions, comments, etc. Please do keep them coming through, and we'd be keen to actually have your key comments, your key insights, as well as questions that we have people answering. Before we get into all of that, we have a great event lined up. I'm going to ask for some introductions from my fellow panelists, but let me introduce myself. I am Naresh Raja. I lead the data and digital advisory practice here at Grant Thornton, and we're doing a number of things with some exciting clients. But before I talk about that, and I'm going to hand over to Kevin to introduce himself, please.
Thanks, Naresh, and good morning. Yeah, Kevin Murphy. I lead the climate strategy and journey for existing customers at NatWest.
Perfect. And Bill, if you can, we can't see you, but hopefully you can hear us. But Bill, would you like to introduce yourself?
I can hear you, and huge apologies. The joys of digital. My webcam doesn't seem to be enjoying this. I'm Bill Saffron. I'm CEO at Visolution. Very, very pleased to be here, and I'll continue fiddling with my webcam to try and get this one working. But thank you.
Perfect. And I'm hoping Visolution can solve that, at least, Bill, in terms of actually getting your cam to work. So let's hope that happens beforehand. So thank you. So we've got a packed agenda, but as I said, we do want questions and comments coming through. The first thing we're going to talk about is really the kind of agenda is in three parts. The first is I'm going to talk about Grant Thornton's view in terms of digitalization and how we're helping our clients. The second part of the agenda is Kevin Murphy is going to talk about the journey NatWest have gone on in terms of leveraging digital from a green agenda perspective, and then last but not least, Visolution and Bill, once the webcam is up and live, will be talking about really how Visolution, working with Grant Thornton, are helping clients to solve this kind of knotty problem and some of the key things they're finding with some of our other clients. So with that, let's go straight into it. If we can go to the next part of the slide, please. So how does Grant Thornton really see digital transformation? And digital transformation in the last 18 months has been an overused word, and many clients are really talking about, and organizations and individuals about digital. What does digital really mean, and what do we mean by digital? And importantly, what do customers, your end customers of financial services clients, actually mean by digital? So we have a hub and spoke model when we talk about digital, based on where there is actual pull from organizations seeking to leverage digital activity, and then where there's benefits being really acquired in terms of moving to digital. And this hub and spoke model is really based on 9 key components that we're seeing organizations invest in terms of technology, invest in terms of skill sets, and in terms of ecosystem partnerships to grow the digital agenda. And let me talk about those 9 things very briefly. So those nine things are: the first is cybersecurity, having cybersecurity in place, so to make sure any organization being able to move to a digital environment, they need to be secure. Not only from an organization standpoint, customers are wanting these organizations to be secure, to be dealing with. And I think we're seeing a lot of things in terms of the news, in terms of cyber attacks. You would have woken up to the news today in terms of Russia and Ukraine, and my understanding and my belief, and I think you're seeing that over the view, is cyber attacks may actually intensify as a result of that. So one, to make sure that organizations' resilience is in place. The second key component we're seeing is data. Data is the lifeblood of digital, and without data, there is no point in having a digital journey, a digital transformation. So again, data here really is about managing defense, controls, governance, regulatory obligations, and offense in terms of actually making sure that you're able to gain revenue, customer acquisition, increasing net promoter score. So data is a really lifeblood of that. And then you have technology risk and assurance really linked to actually making sure that there are assurance and risk mitigations in terms of the technology that's being used. Intelligent automation, how do you automate? And again, our partners, Visolution, will talk about that one aspect of that. How do you automate some of the customer journeys to actually gain traction? Payments and digital payments, using distributed ledger technology for interactions, and then making sure you're leveraging cloud in an effective way. And then underpinning that really are two things. One, ecosystem partnerships. Our clients are using technology firms, application firms, etc. do that, and also making sure that there is a focus on understanding what is digital. So we're going to move on maybe on that part, which is how do you actually define how well an organization is moving in terms of digital? So if we move on to the next slide, I think the key thing here is to talk about every organization wanting to go on this journey around digital has to understand their digital maturity. And what we've created at Grant Thornton is a digital maturity assessment, really to evaluate how organizations are moving in terms of digital, from based on 6 key themes, where we undertake an evaluation for many of our clients, and they've found that very, very beneficial on their digital journey. The first is starting with customer, has to start with customer first, customer engagement, customer insights, etc. The second is culture. Is the organization really there in terms of growing to understand the digital culture? Third is having a sustainable operating model. The fourth is around capabilities, acquiring the right capabilities to move forward in terms of digital skills, and then talent retention. The fifth, as I said, data is key in terms of not only data strategy and data governance, but data analytics, data platforms, and data really powering the digital journey. And then finally, technology, having the right technology, infrastructure, architecture, cloud technologies, etc., to be able to enable this all to happen. And we see many of our clients who we're supporting on the digital journey, this is an assessment they undertake with our help to be able to evaluate where they are and where they need to get to. So very briefly, in terms of the next slide, I think what's quite important here is just the outputs. So some of our clients we've supported actually get a report in effect to understand where they are in terms of their digital journey, and the spider diagram is kind of one output, and then they take a look at it in terms of, are they nascent in terms of their digital transformation, are they developing, are they maturing, or they're leading. And again, if people are interested in terms of the digital maturity assessment and understand where they are, please contact me. It works really well with a set of individuals like the chief digital officer, chief data officer, and their teams, or also the exec table that we run it for. So that hopefully helps you understand that the digital journey has to have an anchor point before we kind of progress. If we move on to talk about our FinTech Hub and where our partnership with Visolution comes in, is we have something we call our FinTech Hub, which is all about bringing the regulated service providers or the regulated firms, banks, asset managers, insurance, etc. We're very grateful for Kevin from a NatWest Bank standpoint to be here. But then working with fintechs, those organizations who can provide automation, data, software, etc., to be able to solve the problems, to bring that together. And Grant Thornton really is a glue in terms of bringing some of these clients together with the best fintechs and automation companies to solve a number of use cases. And you can see some of those use cases there at the bottom of the page. But again, if people are interested in terms of how we do that, in terms of bringing organizations together with the right solutions, do feel free to contact me outside of the session. But so we looked at specific use cases, and the specific use case, if we move to the next slide, is about the real challenge we're seeing in industry at the moment is around the customer journeys and the customer journey pain points. And the customer journey pain points really come from post-COVID or during COVID. If we're being dragged, organizations are being dragged to interact with their customers digitally, legacy organizations, how do they do that in a really effective and efficient way to be able to digitally engage with their customers, given legacy telephony and also branch and other type of manual interactions? But how do they do that without losing the human touch? which is you're not actually dealing with just a bot, or you're not dealing with a computer screen and you don't have any interactions. So that is quite a massive pain point that we're seeing, and that's how our collaboration with it was important. But we'll come to that. But some of the things we'll talk about, and I'm hoping we're helping clients with, is really these 4 root causes in terms of the digital journey. First is, how do clients but also operations teams understand complex product journeys and be able to make sure they're guiding their customers in the right way in a digital fashion. Secondly, the paper, and again, Kevin will touch on this as well in terms of the green agenda, but exchanging document by mail, in terms of the actual inefficiencies around that, of sending applications, sending documents, coming back, processing. Third is about manually customers have to fill out multiple forms. There are errors in terms of those forms. It's a very inefficient process, and then someone has to review it. It has to be sent back. And again, from a green agenda, lots of paper. And then finally, advisors and customer operations teams having to actually sit there and read out scripts, and customers having to kind of really having to address that. All of these are kind of root issues we're seeing in banking, but in asset management and insurance, and capital markets. So how do we solve that? If we move to the next kind of slide, please, is Grant Thornton, based on the FinTech Hub, we're working with Visolution, and it's where the sum of all parts is better than the kind of individual items, where our joint offering with Visolution is about making sure that we can help financial services organizations really accelerate their digital journey, but do that in a humanized way without losing any implications in terms of that human touch, but to do that in an efficient way for frontline staff and operational teams to do that. Take out waste in terms of paper, take out waste in terms of the kind of interactions that are happening, but also from a net promoter score perspective for customers and clients, end customers and clients, for them to feel that it's an effectively a good journey that they're going on. An effect, so to able to have that interaction in place. And we see all of that increasing revenue for our clients, increasing efficiency, increasing service effectiveness, which comes in reducing complaints and increasing net promoter score, reducing compliance risks, and ultimately increasing customer experience. So I hope that's helpful in terms of 3 things I'd like to leave with you in terms of my part of this conversation. The first is, at the digital agenda, there's no easy way to move into a digital transformation without understanding where you are digitally in terms of digital maturity. The second is our FinTech proposition, which is about bringing regulated firms together with the most exciting and interesting tech firms out there, software firms like Visolution. And the third, our unique collaboration with Visolution, is about how do we actually help clients solve this knotty problem of our humanized customer contact. So there are my contact details. Feel free to get in touch with me outside of this call if you'd like any input. But I'm going to hand over to Kevin to bring to life exactly one of those use cases, which is how about digitizing the customer journey and the interactions could help not only the customers, but also from a green agenda and ESG agenda. It's helping NatWest and helping the wider community. With that, I'm going to hand over to Kevin.
Naresh, thank you. And as you say, I'll apply a slightly broader lens to the discussion, which is the journey that we are all facing as customers, as businesses, and as citizens, and that's the one of the climate challenge that we face. Bill will talk later about how NatWest and Visolution have partnered. And we've partnered to create a really terrific solution for our customers, not only in terms of the experience, but also, as we've just mentioned, in terms of the support it gives to the climate. So I won't steal Bill's thunder on that and the specifics of the actual journey, but I will give you some context around why it's so important to NatWest and how we are building our credentials and hopefully building the conditions that allow our customers and our partners to face into this challenge. We're very fortunate in NatWest, where our CEO, Alison Rose, has been very clear that our purpose is very much aligned to how we challenge the climate problem, and Alison talks about it as being one of the most complex challenges facing society today. And based on what I have seen, I absolutely agree with that. Climate change is not only increasing the temperature across the globe, it's also creating a huge fog of uncertainty for our customers and indeed for our businesses. And David Attenborough talks about it as being a communication crisis as opposed to even a climate crisis. And that's why NatWest, and you'll see on the slide, have created a strategy that starts, as Naresh mentioned earlier on, with the customer. And what we need to be really mindful of is that while climate change is not a new thing, it is certainly something that most of our customers are either not aware of or don't understand where they can start to support and help the challenge that we face. So a couple of proof points that I wanted to just talk to in terms of customer engagement. The digitisation that Naresh talked about and Bill will talk about going forward, over and above the paperless journey that we have created, we've also started to create digital energy performance certificates for our customers. So at the moment, if a customer wants their energy performance certificate, they have to have a physical assessment done in their homes. Through work with another partner, NatWest have been starting to look at how do we support our customers with a free energy performance certificate, which is a digital performance certificate, and which allows our customers to start generating that awareness. Every financial health check we do with our customers now includes questions around their climate status and their climate plans. We've also last year launched our Green Homes Attitude Tracker, which again tracks the consumer sentiment of our customers, and not just our customers, but right across the UK, as well as creating climate hubs on our web pages and on our broker web pages to allow our customers and brokers to understand what is available to allow our customers to support this challenge that we face. So from a customer experience perspective, from a customer awareness perspective, we're doing a lot of things that allow our customers to start that journey about how they change. In terms of products, which is our second element, we were the first major bank to launch green mortgages back in November 2020, and again, with the help of Resolution, every single one of those green mortgages who self-serve are done in a paperless manner, so fully digital. We have launched Green Remortgage, we have launched Green Buy to Let, and we now can stand behind a full suite of products that we support our customers with. This year, we will launch an additional borrowing product, which will be a real game changer, because that will help our customers move from a lower energy efficiency home into a higher energy efficiency home. And that is something that is missing at the moment. Currently, we provide reward products. This year, we will start to provide support products. Equally, and Naresh mentioned it earlier on, data is absolutely key to this challenge, and climate is new. I wouldn't say digitisation is new per se, but grouping climate and digitisation together and trying to understand the data thereof, e.g. your emissions data, your energy performance data, all of this is fairly new to individuals and customers and even businesses. So it's a key pillar of our strategy. And maybe the last piece just for me in terms of our strategy, and it's on the next slide, is a bit of a spotlight on the fact that we recognise that no one can solve this solution. In fact, everyone has a responsibility to lean into this solution, and that's why, you know, we like we partner with Resolution in terms of our paperless mortgages. We are also partnering with British Gas, with Shelter, and with Worcester Bosch in a Sustainable Homes and Buildings Coalition, and we launched that last year. And we've launched a report you'll see in the right hand side of the slide, Home is Where the Heat Is, and we anchored to that report throughout COP last year, where we had a number of panels energising, influencing and educating not just customers but also our government and also the supply chain. And through the course of 2022, what we will be doing in that regard is we will be starting to lift the report off the page, and we're actually piloting with a number of customers their own experience to retrofit their home from a low energy efficiency rating home to a high energy efficiency home. And that just comes at a time when it, you know, the average heating bill, I think, has gone from £1,200 to £1,900 just from the recent caps. So it comes at a time where customers need to be supported and helped through this challenge. Equally, we're not only looking at the customer element, we're also engaging, as I mentioned, with the government. We have sessions in diary with Andy Burnham in Manchester, with the leads of Glasgow, and we'll be going right across all mayors through the course of 22 to engage, influence, educate and listen in terms of the challenges that they are facing. We also have a series of events with the government themselves in terms of Lord Deben, chair of the Climate Change Committee. We're sitting down with him in March again to drive influence and change. And the reason I'm sharing all this in the context of what we're talking about is that this is a challenge from a climate perspective, but it's also a challenge from a customer perspective, a communications perspective, a cost perspective, and much of what we do in terms of digitisation supports that very real challenge that we're facing. And with that, I think it's probably a good time then just to hand across to Bill, who will talk a bit more about what Visolution have been doing and some of the partnership that Visolution and NatWest have created and delivered over the recent years.
Kevin, thank you so much, and that's kind of insightful. Do you mind me asking a question before we move into to Bill? And Bill, I'm hoping the Visolution magicians have got your video working. It doesn't appear so, but till we do that. Kevin, what do you see as the future? Now, I mean, that seems to have been great attempt to actually really kind of, you know, pick the ESG agenda from a green standpoint and actually make it practical from a mortgage standpoint, as opposed to just words. And you know, what's next for NatWest, given your commitments you've made, but also the progress you've made?
Great question, and thank you. And I think so. We've set out an ambition to reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030. And we've also set out our ambition to improve our energy performance certificate of our book, 50% being C or above. So that is our, I'll say, immediate ambition is out to 2030, and it's equally one that we don't have a clear pathway to. And I think, as we all have seen, all governments coming out of COP and all businesses coming out of COP, no one has necessarily a clear pathway to hit the Paris alignment, which is 1.5 degrees to allow our planet to survive, if you like. What I see as a real practical solution, and what we are focusing on over the coming years, is what you mentioned earlier on, Naresh, is data. And what I mean specifically about that is that the energy performance certificate of a home will tell you what the fabric looks like of the home. It won't tell you about the behaviour within the home, the occupants within the home. And so what we are doing and working with a couple of different partners on is understanding how do we take advantage of the smart home, if you like, and how we take advantage of smart meters, smart thermostats, and how we can then understand, measure and nudge our customers to change. So real quick example, smart thermostats, the research has shown that anyone who installs a smart thermostat will reduce their heating emissions by 15% and their costs by 15%. That's a massive amount of impact to the planet, but also the individual's pocket. And what we have recognised is that, truthfully, human nature says we all publicly want to support the climate, but privately, when it comes to it, it's actually the pocket that takes precedence. So what we need to make it is we need to make it easy, and we need to make it good for the pocket and for the planet. So our focus is on that data that allows people to make easy decisions and they are digitized. Sorry, maybe the last thing for me is my vision is that the same way that we all pick up our phone and look at our apps, if it's a banking app or any other app, if it's Facebook or Fitbit, I want people to be able to see their energy usage or their emissions usage on their app. And we've started to do that through a partnership with a company called Kogo, where you can start to look some of that through our app, but we need to lift that and make it really visible for our customers.
Sure. And Kevin, one question that's come through is, what's your biggest learning? I mean, going through this exercise, you would have had a couple of learnings. Are there one or two learnings as your peers and others in financial services are looking to learn from this? Are there one or two key lessons you'll call out that you've learned since going on this journey?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So learning number one is that we are relying on millions of individual decisions, and we can't dictate or mandate that our customers make choices. We need to make it easy for our customers to make those choices. So we did that in our Green Mortgage, where we made it a digitized product. We made it a product that will always be less expensive than our standard product, and we made it a product that incentivizes people to help the planet. So but that is all of those things make it easy for the customer to make the decision. So the learning is it's got to be about the customer. People talk about 50% emissions, as have I just. The truth is, customers don't necessarily understand that. If you tell them that they can reduce their bill by 15%, and by the way, that helps with the planet, then that makes a difference. So speaking the language of the customer and not talking about 1.5 degrees even, again, people kind of get that, but really it's about personalization. So I would say that's the single biggest learning, and maybe the second element is that we need to be mindful and patient. I have a major internal battle on a daily basis where our requirement and desire, quite rightly so, to support the transition plans to get to net zero, that this is not a tomorrow thing. It's a today thing in terms of taking action, but it's not a tomorrow thing in terms of solving it. And people need to have patience and get used to managing a target that's 10 years out. How often do we do that? Very infrequently.
Sure. And Kevin, one final question from me, actually, and I know Bill's chomping at the bits to bring this to life, but it's very interesting you say about actually people's, at the end of the day, it's, everybody wants to do good. And I think there's a power with charities and the green agenda. You can kind of see there are power symbols. Everybody wants to contribute to charity. Everybody wants to contribute to a good cause. But when it comes down to the wallet and it comes down to their viewpoint, there's obviously an implication. There's also fatigue that I think you're referring to, which is, the bit that one individual, how much is one individual can really make a change, or one household can really make a change to do that. And the third component really is around reward. And the reward you mentioned is financial reward. So I suppose it's a bit of a statement, but question in two ways, actually. One is, how do you deal with the kind of lethargy, which is whatever one household or whatever one individual does, it's never going to be enough, okay? And the second question, part of that question then, is really around, you've talked about financial reward, which is good. They have a return based on taking out your products because you're ultimately helping their wallet. But sometimes people need to feel good about what they're doing, and although they'll always claim they don't want that, but they'd also want to see some sort of recognition from others that they're doing good. Have you thought about those two concepts?
Fantastic, and Naresh, thank you. So you're spot on. One of the key things we talk about is pocket, but the other key thing we talk about is social. And we have to make it social. We have to get people, as you've just described, feeling good about making that decision. Now we talk about, so people who drive a Tesla get to drive about in a Tesla, and they look cool, and it's pretty social, and they talk about it, and it's pretty sexy even. People who buy a heat pump it's not particularly social or cool or particularly sexy. So it's very difficult to transition from the private action that you take to the wider action. So we are trying to build on that to make it a bit more social, and that's where things like energy performance certificates come in, where, you know, when you buy an electric car, you get a little green tag sometimes around the registration plate. We're talking about putting green tags around estate agents viewing where you've got the home, so you can feel good about living in a green home. So that will come with time. That will come with advocates, and that, again, back to the point around this communication crisis as opposed to just a climate crisis. So we have to build a lot of that. And I think the other piece is that tax regulation and policy is coming, and so that will influence the behaviour and change the lethargy. So, for example, will stamp duty remain the same for all homes, or will it be reduced for green homes? Will council tax be improved for green homes rather than for browner homes, if you like? So I think there's, again, back to the point around the fact that there's no single story here, and there's a danger of creating a single story. It's all of those things together that will make people feel good about it: social, pocket, and planet.
Perfect. Kevin, thank you so much for answering those questions and being so eloquent and articulate. Thank you. That's really helpful. And Bill, sorry to keep you waiting. Over to you to talk about resolution and take it away, please.
Not at all. Not at all. No, it's very, very interesting, Kevin. Very interesting indeed about what's going on. And, you know, as a supplier to, you know, NatWest, you know, we went through one of your EcoVadis reviews, and we got a bronze where, you know, we're actually net neutral in terms of, you know, our green status. But again, thank you very much. Apologies to everyone that the webcam's not working. It's an embarrassment. You know, the joys of digital. So I'm sure everyone's lived through that. So apologies on that one. So it's great to be here and great to be in such great companies. You know, I took a look through the attendees that are joining us today, and it's really kind of the who's who of the most powerful and industry recognized brands in the UK and if not the world. So it's great to have you here. Today I'm going to chat about a little bit about what we're seeing in the marketplace and about humanizing digital journeys and how that can have a real impact not only on your KPIs but also on the environment as well. So if we go into the next slide, I think the first thing to really focus on is you know, historically when we chat to a number of our clients and when they talk about digital, they're talking about self-serve, web, online, and that's it. And our view is that, you know, one needs to take a more holistic view of what is digital. You know, digital is not the myopic, just digital online. It's really the entire, you know, end-to-end journey. And I think that this is really important. It goes across all channels. So it goes, you know, telephony should be digital, branch should be digital. You know, all your engagements with the customer from end to end should be digital. And I think that this is really an important approach here, because what we're seeing is that isolation, that just, you know, that self-serve online is regarded as digital. And if you keep a myopic view, then what typically happens is you end up with a, say, a suboptimal overall customer journey. And you know, what we've also seen amongst a number of our clients is that their organizational structures have also impacted this myopic view. And it's, you know, you end up with, you know, channel structures where you have digital here and you've got branch there and you've got telephony there, and they don't talk to each other. In fact, a lot of the times they hate each other, and they're all trying to solve that one customer journey. Now, what we're seeing with other customers and more advanced ones like NatWest is that they're taking a more holistic view of the journey. So the journey is what's the important part. All the channels then fit into that journey for that customer to make it as seamless as possible. If we go into the next slide. So if what we're seeing is these suboptimal journeys, what the impact on the customer can really be, quite dramatic. Is that if you're forcing the customer to go through these complex, convoluted, fractured journeys that are really based around what's good for the business rather than what's good for the customer, you end up impacting yourself. And these costs are more than just money. You're seeing reduced conversion rates, increased customer churn, customer satisfaction goes down, disengagement of employees, and this is important on the employee side. If you're not giving the right digital tools to the employees to engage with their customers better, the level of satisfaction that they're getting out of their job reduces dramatically. Can we go into the next slide? And so if complexity is the problem, then simplifying, reducing that complexity is really, what we're trying to achieve here. And if you can reduce the friction on that journey and that omni-channel journey, then you end up with better journeys for the customer, and improve customer loyalty, improve retention, reduce costs, and very much so environmental impact. And we're seeing really a lot of, the situations that we're seeing are not just, hey, if you do A, you can improve A, but it will reduce B and will impact B. What we're seeing is if you improve A, it will improve B, which will improve C. So if we go into the next slide. So we've got a little question, a little poll here. Now, when we chat to our clients, we found the most challenging journeys that they see are ones that are both very important to the business and the customer, those that are affected by regulation and compliance. So, compliance brings complexity, and then slowed down by paperwork or signatures or the need to receive, documentation, ID, and etc. And so we're going to try out the poll feature that we've got here. So what is your most challenging customer journey? Is it A, new customer acquisition? Oh, there we go. New customer acquisition, onboarding, sensitive customer care. And this is a big one. For those who are FCA regulated, they see the new regulation coming through with customer care. So this is bereavement, debt management, remediation, or is there something else? So we'll give you a second to click on that. I don't necessarily see the results. Naresh, are you seeing the results on these?
I'm sorry, Bill, it'll take a few minutes, I think, in terms of for that to come through. But whilst we're doing that, I suppose maybe a question for you and Kevin in this is, if you think about the most challenging customer journey from your perspective, what do you mean by challenging? I suppose is, as you see the customer journey, what are those kind of attributes you think are challenging? So one for you, Bill. I mean, how do you define challenging?
I think challenging is a little bit in the eye of the beholder. So if you approach everything, and we like to approach everything from the customer point of view, the end customer point of view. So what makes it a challenging journey for them is, number one, importance. So let's take a mortgage. Mortgage is the largest financial decision these guys are going to make in their life. Pension. This is how you're going to live post-retirement. So challenge for them is something that is of importance to them, and typically will have a major impact on what their enjoyment of life. And then sure. The other side that we see is on the regulation compliance, and this is really the journeys that those customers are forced through by say the big bank, and compliance just overrides just kind of everything that they do. So it's a lot of terms and conditions. It's a lot of paper going back and forth. It's a lot of proof of IDs, proof of incomes, proof of affordability, etc. And I think it's the combination of the two of those. And then what we see a lot is the customer being forced to go down, channels that they don't want to go down. How many times do you hear, sort of like, oh, you got to go into the branch to do that. You got to go into a store to do that. You need to do that face to face. The customers try to do something digitally, or they've tried to do something through telephony, and they're being forced down a path they don't want to go down.
Sure. And before, I mean, we can see some of the results coming through now, but Kevin, did you have a view from your experience, from a NatWest standpoint, from speaking to your colleagues and obviously being in a kind of senior position, where do you see the most challenging customer journey?
Yeah, thank you. And I think Bill's spot on in terms of, that regulatory compliance piece is massive, particularly in mortgages. So I've worked across everyday banking, personal banking, short-term borrowing. And I think the mortgage element is by far and away the most complex, and therefore it challenges you then to digitize, because actually the three things I wrote down as you asked the question was marketing permissions. So it's not necessarily just a journey, but how do you engage with the customer, because you want to provide them with a better service, but they don't click on your marketing permissions, and that also feeds into personalization. Everyone wants to have a personal offer, but data is very protected, and therefore how do you balance that conundrum? And the third and last piece is something which I'm also responsible for in NatWest and mortgages, is the customers in vulnerable situations, and you could argue that's in the sensitive customer care element in the poll, but that's right across our piece, where with the FCA launching Consumer Duty, but also with our desire to support all of our customers, it's about trying to develop and design a customer journey that's simple enough but treats all of our customers fairly. And I think that's the biggest challenge we have, alongside, as we mentioned, regulatory compliance and marketing elements.
Perfect. Thank you, Ken. That's really helpful. And I think the scores are in, Bill. And I think it really chimes to what you were saying, but also what Kevin's saying: new customer acquisition, but specifically in customer journeys in terms of lending, credit cards, mortgages, where there is obviously complexity in terms of the data and complexity in terms of actually completing some of those instructions. There's obviously a key one there. What is quite interesting is the ones that we would see as, for organizations, under regulation, like bereavement and remediation, is probably less from our participants at 11%, which is slightly surprising in terms of response. So I think that's my reflection in terms of that, Bill. But I don't know whether you want to comment or move on to your next segment.
No, I mean, I personally, I think that this, reflects a little bit of what we're seeing in the marketplace, which is this new acquisition. And as Kevin was saying, is, how do you give a fair journey for the customer, but still, cover the bank's, rear end on this, to make sure that it's being documented correctly, so that if there is an issue later down the road, there's proof of the process that you've gone through. I think that's really very important. I mean, if you start thinking about, PPI, was there mis-selling? Yeah, without doubt, but a lot of it was just poor documentation. Sure. And the inability to prove that you went through a compliant process.
I think that's helpful, Bill. And to be honest, when I was in exec positions both at Barclays and Lloyds, I never thought about protecting my behind. I think it was more than that, but just to let you know. but I think really, really helpful. I suppose one thing that you have mentioned, but it's really important, is good record keeping. And the good record keeping is what we're really also articulating, is not just the customer experience at the end of the day, but the record keeping, specifically in certain instances of vulnerable customers, specific regulations like MiFID II from a wealth standpoint and others. Good record keeping is fundamental, and it does avoid remediation if you've got those good records that are in place, and you're able to articulate from an auditor standpoint, but also importantly the regulator standpoint. You have the evidence to be able to back up what happened 5 years, etc., back, in terms of when an account was opened or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. So in terms of digitization, and what we're talking about is, really there's a number of focuses, we think, for digitization. And what we're seeing from our customers is one which is humanizing that digital experience. So as we've just discussed, there are, fundamental journeys that big banks have literally spent billions of pounds developing, these online self-serve only journeys. And they're not necessarily seeing the throughput that they expected. And the rationale for that is really what we just discussed, which is either the process is too complex, or the product is too complex, or it's just too important for the customer. Is that, they want to talk to someone, they want some reassurance, to make these big life decisions. And so what we're saying is that there is a need to humanize this digital experience, of put a personal face onto what otherwise would have been these self-serve digital journeys, and to provide the customer with the ability to talk to somebody and engage with that somebody. And if they're going to engage with the human, then the next step is digitizing the human experience. Is that the idea today that say a contact center can only talk to the customer in the day of Google and the internet, that all they can do is talk to someone is quite honestly, a little barbaric. They should have all the tools so that they can show, upload, download, sign documents for the customer on a real-time basis. They should be able to give exactly the same experience as someone who had walked into the branch or walked into a store, that face-to-face experience. And then the final bit is that, a big focus of everything that we're seeing is this delivering of green outcomes. Is how do you streamline this process? How do you build your business around ESG goals such as NatWest are doing? And we go into the next slide. And what we're seeing, click it one more time, is paper is a symptom. It is not a cause, and it's a symptom of very poor processes. If you click again. And it's what it shows, what paper shows is customer effort. It's a very, very good indicator of customer effort. And it's forcing customers to do things. It's forcing the customers to change channels. It's forcing customers to print and post. It's forcing you as the banks and the businesses to ingest that paper, to chase that paper, etc. And it really builds inertia into the entire process. If you can remove paper, you end up with a slew of benefits, not only in terms of conversion rates and NPS scores, etc., but all the way through to costs and customer satisfaction. In our view, if you go on to the next slide, one of the historically one of the biggest areas of paper-based processes has been the mortgage journey. You've all gone through these mortgage journeys before on a personal level. You've all experienced the pain that is associated with that. The printing and posting and pay slips and proof of IDs, etc. And a historic journey, which is very, very paper-based, is slow, is painful. Now, what you can do is you can streamline this and turn it into a digital journey where you've got the ability to do things in a digital way, both self-serve digital, but also agent-assisted. People want to talk to people. So the journeys that we do, we've done one with NatWest, a very, very good one. It's the first paperless journey in the UK. And what it does is it combines the ability for customers to do some things by themselves with an advised process. So it's almost like an assisted digital. So customers can upload documents, download documents by themselves prior to having that advice session with the agent. In that advice session with the agent can do everything that could have happened in the branch. They can show them documents, they can walk through their options, they can do income expenditure, affordability, they can walk through a KFI with the customer, sign an agreement, and then just carry on. And certain things can be done with an agent there, and certain things without the agent there. And I think this is really important, taking that holistic digital view. And the impact is quite substantial. Is that, again, this is the NatWest example, is that they saw an increase from 53 NPS score to 79 NPS score. It's not rocket science. If you can give a journey to a customer that's faster and easier, they're happy. We managed to take 11 days out of the process, so this was about 50%. They're putting about 20 billion through the platform, and we've eliminated 100% of paper. It is completely paperless at the moment, and we estimate that we've saved about 7 million pieces of paper a year. This is substantial, and this is helping to get to those ESG targets that everyone's aiming for. And they won a number of awards, big uptake, all these types of things. But really, it's the benefits that we're seeing across the board. So if we go on to the next slide. This isn't the exception. We're not pulling NatWest out. They did a spectacular job, but it's not the exception. If you can do this holistic digital approach across all channels, you end up seeing benefits across multiple different journeys with customers. And really, all you're trying to do is streamline that journey for a customer, make it easy for that customer, let the customer choose the channel. And we've got our job is to help the bank or the building society, et cetera, engage with that customer on an omni-channel basis. And as I mentioned, this is a win-win-win scenario. Is that this is better for the business, it's better for the customer, it's a slicker journey, but also it's better for the environment. So this is a solution. This holistic digital is a solution that really can deliver benefits across the board. We have another poll question for everyone. I guess if you want to pull up the poll question, even with strong intent and ambition, digital transformation can be very, very difficult to achieve in practice. I mean, you all are leaders in your businesses. What is the biggest issue you face in delivering digital transformation?
So thank you, Bill. And whilst we're waiting for that, I'm glad you put on the brands of the other organizations, because our clients are obviously multiple and not just NatWest. So it's good to kind of have that and in terms of balance. But in the we have a question coming from the audience is, with more personalization of individual digital journeys, how do you ensure that you have complete records to evidence what happened? Do you have a point of view on that question?
Absolutely. Everything has to be recorded. Everything. So everything that we do is recorded. So what we like to do is say, like calculators, etc., that is very, very personalized to that customer. What does it mean to them? It's not a generic. It's what does it mean to them? But you also then need to be able to capture that, create that audit trail, so that as your example, Naresh, in 5 years' time, if someone comes back, you can prove this is the discussion that we had, and this is why we came out with the conclusions that we came out with.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Bill. And so whilst we're waiting in terms of the kind of responses to come back, I suppose the biggest issue, are there others that in terms of the biggest issues in delivering digital transformation? It's interesting you don't mention budget or in that. Is that under competing resource and priorities, or do you feel that that's really not a big issue?
Budget's always an issue, but at the end of the day, it is budget is those competing resources and priorities. Is that big banks like NatWest are literally spending billions of pounds on digital transformation. The question is where are those being allocated? Where's that money being allocated?
Sure. So I think the results are in from the jury, and I think it's top of the list is competing resources and priorities, which is 62%, which is quite overwhelming in terms of the number in effect. And I think I don't know, Bill or Kevin, you want to comment, but that's probably in line with what we are seeing as well with a variety of organisations.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for sure, the competing resources and priorities is a continual, perennial challenge, and it's one that so NatWest have went through their own agile transformation, but it remains it just remains a challenge to be able to prioritise, and I haven't yet found a silver bullet of a prioritisation tool that allows us to do that. It really is something that I think is a bit of a holy grail. And it will continue, but I think the key there is back to what we talked about earlier, is getting the data so that you can demonstrate the return on investment. And probably the second element is working in that agile methodology. That means that you don't wait 6 months to see if something's working or not. You invest small, get return small, and build as you go through.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. So I think what we're going to do is probably just in terms of questions. I don't know whether anybody else has any questions. Please do kind of come bring it through. I think we've probably got time for one more question kind of coming through. So, but whilst we're doing that, why don't we go on to the next part? So this has been really interesting, and I hope everybody's found it quite fascinating. But we've only touched the surface in terms of digital transformation and customer journey. My thanks to Kevin and also Bill for a really enlightening conversation. You have our details, so please do contact us out afterwards if you want any more input. Emma and the team, who are fantastic in Grant Thornton, they will share some of the materials with you afterwards. But a couple of things, the UK, the regulatory handbook, which is on the previous slide, that is something that we've released from a Grant Thornton standpoint. It has all of the key regulations and regulatory obligations which are coming from a regulator standpoint by industry. So do have a look at that. It's very enlightening and provides a lot of detail. In terms of upcoming events, we've got 3 upcoming events. The first is around UK finance regulatory roadmap, and we've got a number of elements. You'll be either pleased or displeased to know that I'm talking at that event with UK Finance on open finance, and that is going to be a fundamental shift to the industry coming on the back of open banking. So really excited to talk about that. The second is around ESG data. And so we've been doing or working with a client in terms of actually developing an ESG data analytics platform, and we're going to bring that to life on ESG data. Again, do sign up for that one. That's going to be really interesting. And then the third is consumer duty, which a lot of your peers and others are really focused on at the moment, post the FCA consultation paper. And we have an event to talk about consumer duty and what firms can do to prepare and the issues that are coming through. I hope that gives you a really good picture in terms of what's coming up. My thanks again to Bill and Kevin, but my thanks also to all of the participants and who've come through and the questions that have come through. Thank you so much for all your attention. I am going to try to give back 3 minutes in everybody's diary. Have a really good day, and thank you very much.